photo we're working with. What, Mike?
Hi.
Hey, Mike. I don't know Katie's last name. She's married, but her mom is Jean. Lives here in South. She's a former counselor at the school.
Stream is going, so whenever you'd like.
Are you ready, Don? Okay, the special meeting will now come to order so we can continue the canvass of the August 3rd, 2020 primary election. And we ended last week, Thursday, I believe it was, with trying to get some confirmations from the state about what is accurate and what isn't accurate. So I'd like to hear from Donna to see if she got any confirmations.
Thank you, Mr. Schleier. I do have a statement. I was directed by the Board of Canvassers last Thursday to contact the Kansas Secretary of State's office to get clarification on KSA 25-213. And John T. Bird represented the Democratic write-in for Laura Allen for the position of county clerk, had approached the board in reference to KSA 25-213, and more specifically, subsection D of that statute. Mr. Byrd believed that Ms. Allen should be placed on the general election ballot for the county clerk position because of his interpretation of KSA 25-213D. I had earlier received clarification from Brian Caskey at the Kansas Secretary of State's office that any write-in for a county clerk position would need to receive 5% of the total current voter registration. I also contacted our legal counsel, Bill Jeter, and he concurred that this is how the statute reads. Ms. Allen needed 910 write-in votes to be placed on the ballot in the general election. When I contacted the Secretary of State's office after the canvass last Thursday in regards to the same issue, Mr. Caskey reiterated that 5% of the total of the current voter registration designated by the state, county, and district in which the office is sought is needed to be placed on the ballot. Mr. Caskey also indicated that the Secretary of State's office makes every write-in candidate for a state office to abide by this statute exactly as it is written. While Mr. Byrd has taken it upon himself to interpret the law as he sees fit in order to have Ms. Allen placed on the general election ballot, and going as far in making the statement, I quote, "The reason it means what I say it means here today. It started by KSA 25-213D, and the Kansas standards, our standard book does address the same thing very clearly. And again, County Councilor Bill Jeter stated the same thing in Secretary of State's office, that Ms. Allen needed the 5% of the total registered voters designated by the state, county, or district in which the office is sought. Therefore, Ms. Allen should not be placed on the general election ballot, as she fails to meet the 5%, which would have been 910 write-in votes. She received 224 write-in votes. I would also like to address a few misrepresentations in Mr. Byrd's public letter to Secretary of State Scott Schwab. Mr. Byrd accused me that I did not take notes or solicit his notes from him regarding his research. My deputy, Bobby Dreiling, had recorded the entire conversation given by Mr. Byrd to the Board of Canvassers on Thursday night. Addressed by Mr. Byrd of his concerns was the prior wording of KSA 25213D versus how the state statute currently reads. Mr. Byrd grossly misrepresented in his letter to the Secretary of State that I orally stated during the canvass that Laura Allen received in excess of 5% of the total votes cast of the Democratic primary, and in excess of the 5% of the total Democratic votes registered in Ellis County. I stated no such number. The only number that were discussed and that I made available at canvass was that Miss Allen did not receive 5% of the total of the current voter registration, which would be 910 write-in votes. In fact, I did not even figure out what percentage Miss Allen received in the Democratic vote, as I knew it had no bearing whatsoever on her being allowed on the general election ballot. Mr. Byrd falsely stated that I will not release any information as requested. Mr. Byrd has been told repeatedly that he will get his information after the canvass is approved. So this statement is not okay, let's see. After the canvass is approved. So this statement is not the truth, and I will. After the certification of election, he will get his records that he's requested on a public records request. That will be granted at that time once approval is given. Lastly, I would like to address Mr. Byrd's implication that my office does not correctly report on the percentage of voter turnout. Historically, Ellis County has reported the turnout by total votes, not by total party turnout, which is and has been our reporting system as long as I've been here, 41 years. As such, given the plain language of Kansas Statute 25-213D, I would ask that the board to formally approve the canvass as presented. That would not allow Ms. Allen to be placed on the general election ballot. Are there any questions?
I have none. Mike?
I have none.
Mike? Okay, no questions.
I will say I did hand out a new provisional. On those 3 votes that I said we were waiting on voter ID, that was not a fact. That was some other ballots, so this is correct what I handed out, which is 3 less ballots than I had handed out to you on Thursday. So that is a correction to the canvass.
Okay.
I ask for approval. Thank you.
Yes, Mr. Byrd, please come up.
Frankly, I didn't intend to do this, but in light of the clerk's decision to call me a liar, I thought maybe I ought to tell you that I did talk to Mr. Caskey about 45 minutes ago. And kind of knowing the situation I was dealing with, I thought it was best to make a record of it, which I did. And Mr. Caskey told me, because I wrote to, as you know, I wrote to the Secretary of State last week because I read in the media that Clerk Maskus announced that she had already contacted the Secretary of State. He had told her that the statute meant exactly what she had already interpreted it to mean, despite the fact that we had had a discussion here about the fact that it had another word in it that just simply didn't make sense unless you put it in context, as I discussed with you at the last meeting. And so I wrote and asked the question that I asked, which was, why is that word in the statute if it doesn't mean the designated election that a voter chooses when he goes into the balloting place to cast his vote? In other words, when you go in Kansas, it's a closed primary system. You ask for either a Republican or a Democratic ballot. You don't just say, I want to vote. You have to ask the clerk to let you vote in one election or the other. You designate which election you want to vote in. So when you look at the statute and it says that you have to have 5% of the designated vote, or registration in this case, it should refer, as I said, to the party affiliation. So I asked the Secretary of State to please look at the legislative history, but I knew that Clerk Maskus had apparently not taken the time to convey that before she made a statement to the media about what the Secretary of State had told her. So I didn't get a response to the letter last week. I didn't get a response to the letter this morning. I called and left a message. They told me that they had referred my letter to Brian Caskey, who's in charge of elections there. They said they'd put him on the phone. I held for about 10 minutes, and finally they came back and said he was too busy to talk to me. So I called back again. They put me on hold for what I thought was a pretty inordinate amount of time. Finally he came on, and I asked him if he had a response for me. He said, no, we don't have an answer for you. And I said, well, we have a canvass at 5 o'clock today. And he said, you're not going to get an answer from us today. Not going to respond before 5 today. And I said, well, I think it'd be helpful if the Board of Canvassers had some response to what I wrote. And he said, well, that's up to the Board of Canvassers. That's not our job. And I said, well, the clerk was supposed to have asked you this question. He said, well, we don't have our office has no legal authority to weigh in on this with the Board of Canvassers. It's the Board of Canvassers' job to certify the results of a primary election. We don't have any response because they didn't ask me a question. Which makes me wonder what really is going on here. Is this just a game that's being played here of verifying what somebody has jumped to a conclusion of? Who wrote that statement for the clerk, for instance? She certainly didn't read what she just read to you. And who's the candidate who benefits from this great conclusion that they've come to, that it's not 5% of the party affiliation, but 5% of the total registration? Who benefits from this? Well, I got a feeling she's sitting behind me recording this meeting. I got a feeling it's the designated replacement for Donna Maskus, who was the designated replacement for her predecessor, which is the way it's been working over here for the last 40 years. And now that somebody stepped forward and tried to give the people a choice, Laura Allen, they want to throw another roadblock in the way. And the one thing I know is that Brian Caskey has now thrown this back in your lap, and he says it's your decision. And you get to read that statute. And the fact of the matter is, anybody who took English in high school can read that statute and see, if you know the history of it, like we talked about at the last meeting, what that really means. It means the designated election. The person who walks in there designates what election they want to participate in. And if they want to write in people, and if more than 5% of the people then write in the name of a Democrat, a particular Democrat, then that person should be on the general election ballot. And if over on the Republican side they had done that and there weren't a candidate, then they should be on the ballot. But this idea that 900 people have to have done that is, as I said in my original letter, it's just absurd. The other thing is, folks, what sophistry is this to claim that she didn't tell you that Laura Allen had at least 5%? I begged her to give us the numbers at the last meeting. Remember, she came in here with one piece of paper because she didn't want to give anybody else these numbers that are public. This is public information. It belongs to me. It belongs to you. It belongs to the court. The media. It belongs to all of these people in this room. and they act like they own this information. And for her to say, well, they're going to get it after the canvass, I asked her for this information. I started asking for information through a public information request on July 17th, and she still hasn't answered those questions. I asked her 13 different things, and she still hasn't answered it. I didn't file a lawsuit or do anything like that. I thought, let's just wait and see what happens here. So I asked her last week for just to give me the names of the people who got their names written in for these various things. She's got them. She absolutely has them. She told me that she has the software in the new package that they bought to replace the old voting machines that were the old voting machines. She's got them, but she won't give them to us because she gets to wait until after the canvass. So she knows exactly how many votes Laura Allen got, and she actually finally, begrudgingly, stated that number last week. Well, get your calculators out and do the numbers, and obviously, Laura Allen had more than 5% of the registered Democrats. She had more than 5% of the total number of Democrats who voted. So under any interpretation of that statute, if it means 5% of the registered Democrats, if it means 5% of the ones who voted, she had enough to get on the ballot. Now, why is she not letting us know that? Why does she want to now point out that somehow, because she didn't say the magic words here, that that's more than 5%, that somehow that makes any difference? This is just a game that's being played, and that's not the way elections should work. Why? Okay, if you want to play games with numbers, do this game. Who's going to pick the next county clerk using these rules? Okay, 56% of the Republicans voted in the primary election. Now, I told you before that's a good turnout, but she doesn't like me saying that because she wants to say that only 37% of all the voters voted. I don't know why that offends her that I point out that that's a good turnout, but that was a pretty good turnout, 56% of the Republicans. About 47% of the total voters in Ellis County are registered Republicans, I think. 9,000 out of 18,000, a little less than that, are Republicans. So 56%, just rounded up to 60% of almost 50% Republicans. So 60% times that percentage. So that's the people who elect the next county clerk. The election's over if you don't give people a choice in the general election. That's the way it works under these rules. And that's just not right. If somebody goes to the trouble of going to the polls when there's really not anything going on and writes people in, like the Democrats did in this county, then you ought to put them on the general election ballot. That's all we're saying. So I think that Brian Caskey, if you call him tomorrow and ask him, he's going to tell you, I'm not a lawyer. They haven't contacted me. He said, I haven't had a single conversation with anyone, meaning you, individually. And it's the County Board of Canvassers' job. I haven't had a single conversation with anyone on the Board of Canvassers about this issue. At least call him and ask him what he means. Does he mean that you can't put her on the ballot? I don't think so. I think he's just saying you get to make the choice. And I'm not saying Bill Jeter isn't a good lawyer. He is a good lawyer. He's read it, and knowing what he knows, he says the 10% or the 5% is of all the voters. That's definitely what it means without the word designated. But with the word designated in it, there's no reason to put that word in if it doesn't mean something, is what I'm saying. So we're asking you to be your own board, like Secretary of State says, and put Laura Allen on the ballot, please. Thank you.
Donna, did Mr. Cassidy talk to you? Who did you talk
Yes.
to?
I talked to Brian Caskey, the election officer at the Kansas Secretary of State's office. He said it's very clear what that piece of legislation says.
And he said 5%.
He
of the total
definitely does at
voters.
the total voter count.
Right,
No question, he said.
okay.
And we did personally talk to him, and I had 2 office people in my office when I spoke. It wasn't just me.
You want to say something? Come on up, Dustin.
Thank you, Commissioner. Canvassing Board, I'm Dustin Rhodes, Chair of the Ellis County Republican Party. First of all, I'd just like to say, interesting toward the end of Mr. Bird's conversation is the idea that you could put Laura Allen on this ballot in the general election, have her name printed. No, you will get a lawsuit from the Republican Party if that happens, because you will not be following state statute. So I hope that you know and understand that. But I have a statement. First of all, there's a reason why reading this statute is important and why we think that filing before a deadline is important. We want serious candidates, people who have deliberated about their decision to run for public office and made the time commitment to file by petition or monetary commitment to put themselves on a primary ballot. Laura Allen was told how many write-in votes she needed to receive. She did not get enough to have her name printed on the general election ballot. But she may continue her write-in campaign if she feels like she has an upswell of voters. Mr. Bird's problem is not with the election cycle or our Ellis County Clerk's office. His problem is with the law. If he would like to lobby for a law change or even run for public office himself, that's his prerogative. Being upset with the results of an election have seemed to be the catalyst for much of the scrutiny from Mr. Byrd and the Ellis County Democrats to our election processes. Lacking registered Democrats who want to run for office in Ellis County is not the business of this canvassing board. And bending the rules for any person, Republican or Democrat, is against this very clear statute. We believe changing this law will prove difficult because we believe that write-in campaigns should demonstrate a serious upswell of support before circumventing the filing process. Candidates need to be serious, calculated, and committed to the task at hand. Making the write-in process easier seems to be counterproductive to that task. That's all for me.
Okay, thank you. Sure, come on up.
I don't have anything prepared for you. I apologize. I just want to speak to wanting serious candidates. Perhaps I deliberated a little bit too long about deciding to run for county clerk, and I apologize for that. However, to imply that it was a lack of initiative or a lack of seriousness on my part is not correct. I did think long and hard about whether or not I wanted to follow this process. And as far as I'm concerned, the deliberation that I have shown through here should show my seriousness. I am not an attorney. I don't know the rules. I don't know the statutes. I have read it. And in reading it, I tend to agree with John. I was under the impression that it was the canvasser's decision, as Brian Caskey had said. I don't know if that's the case. I would not threaten a lawsuit because it's not my intent to cause the county or the taxpayers any undue costs in fighting a lawsuit to get my name on the ballot. I will continue to follow my write-in campaign. And I believe that we could be successful with that. And whether or not my name is on the ballot, I will continue to do that. However, please know that it was not done on any whim, and it's not something that was done without deliberation on my part as far as the deadlines go. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, thank you. Comments, Mike?
No, I don't have any comments.
Comments, Mike?
I just had hate those things. Just had a couple quick questions, just to make sure that I understand exactly what the options are for getting the name on the ballot. And Donna, if you could comment, and Mr. Byrd, if you have anything to add. My understanding is that there were 3 options with which to get the name on the ballot. The first would be secure 3% of Democratic signatures on a petition to get your name printed on that primary ballot. And if you were successful on the primary, then you would go on to the general ballot as well. Is that correct?
That is correct, yes.
And the number of signatures for that, by my calculation, was 116. Does that sound right?
Okay, for a county candidate, it'd be 116 for Democrats and 262 for a Republican candidate.
Public school math. Yay. Okay. The second question was, the other option would be to declare intent to file and then pay the fee, which in this case would be $680 for that position.
Plus the $50, or that includes the $50 filing fee.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the last option will be the write-in vote where, according to 25213D, and according to the Secretary of State interpretation, it would require 910 votes,
That is correct.
okay, to prevail and get that 5% to go on the general ballot. Okay. Were any signatures turned in prior to the election?
We had no candidates filed by petition this year.
Okay. That was my question. Thank you.
Okay.
I might respond to that real briefly. Remember what was going on prior to the filing deadline was there was a pandemic that had shut down the community for a while. Pretty tough to get people to come to the door even at that point in Ellis County.
Right.
I will point out too that I have an immunocompromised son, so I have to say for his well-being, I can't go. I was not in a position to be able to go to do that.
Right.
Just wasn't an option.
Okay, so there still is an option in so much as a write-in campaign can still be mounted at this point for the general. And Ms. Allen, you referred to that?
Right.
Okay, super. Thank you.
Okay. Okay, well, I'm sure not an attorney, and I'm not going to try to interpret statutes. That's why we hire a county counselor. I have no reason to not believe Clerk Maskus talked to Mr. Cassidy. I did read some of a guidance document. I think I was at the Administrative Center on Friday, and I read a guidance document. That's the same guidance document that the state of Kansas puts out in every county regarding the elections. Every county. And I do know that county government is simply an extension of state government. Each department has its counterpart at state, with just some minor exceptions. Each department is governed by statutes, by policy, by regulations, protocols. They tell us what we're going to do and how we're going to do it. Bill Ring can't go out here and build and maintain roads and bridges by doing what he wants to do. He has to follow protocols. Jason's going to do surveillance. He's going to do it the way the state tells him to do it. Even Mike over here to my right, he don't have a department at the state, but they sure tell him how his IT system has to be in order to run the state programs and software. And if we as a board of canvassers just want to go off and start interpreting our own laws and rules, that could open up a whole can of worms, just a whole can of worms. You could have 105 counties doing 105 different things. I don't know if that statute is the way Mr. Byrd interprets it or the way Mr. Jeter interprets it. I don't know. I'm not going to try to interpret it. I'm just going to go with what our county counselor says and what Clerk Maskus told us Mr. Cassidy said. Because that's the direction we should go. It's the directives as given by the state of Kansas. And to do otherwise would just really screw up the whole works. Ms. Allen, someday if you find yourself elected to county clerk, you're going to find that you will have all kinds of rules, regulations, directive, policy memos, whatever to follow. And they will tell you what to follow. It's just the way it is. I've been in this business long enough to know that. Any other comments from people?
No,
Okay,
none
I
for me.
make a motion, we certify the election as presented by Clerk Maskus, in accordance with statute and directives given by the state of Kansas.
I'll second that.
Second, we have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion passes 3-0. The special meeting will now adjourn.
I'll tell you how much they are. I'll touch base first thing in the morning. That's what your public request is, and we charge $1 a page.
I've got it all with me. I have a copy of it, please.
But it's several pages, John. You wanted all the write-ins, is what you requested. I gave that to you on Thursday.
Donna, he can have mine.
Yeah, I have that.
Okay, so he can have mine. He needs some.
I was thinking that you had this already on. This is the first. So, yeah, that's what I shared. But I'll touch base with you in the morning, on those copies you requested.
Right, with the write-in name?
Yes, definitely.
Okay, the meeting of the Board of Ellis County Commissioners will now come to order. Let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Donna, would you like to call the roll?
Glad to. Commissioner Dean Hazelhorse,
Present.
Commissioner Butch Schleier,
Present?
Dustin Long.
Present.
You have a promise.
Okay. Any changes to the order of business tonight? Any executive sessions?
No, sir.
Okay. Prior minutes from August 10th.
Order of business.
Prior minutes.
No questions.
I got one, Katie.
Commissioner Ross, prior minutes, do you have any questions?
No issues from me on that.
Okay, then the minutes will stand as submitted. I need a motion for the consent agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent agenda items A through G.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0. Any issues from persons not on the order of business? Doesn't look like it. Monthly department report, did you guys get a chance to review that?
Yeah.
Very, very good as always. They do a
Good and
great job.
complete. Everyone was busy.
For anybody that could get a chance to go through that, it's quite an extensive document, but if you want to know what's going on in county government, you'll get a real snapshot from that.
Yeah, it is.
Absolutely.
Very good.
Okay, moving on then, we have the COVID-19 update. Jason?
Good evening, Commissioners. Jason Kennedy. I forget my title sometimes. Public Health Director.
Jack of all trades.
There we go. So we'll go through briefly our, so this is the picture of what our dashboard looks like as far as on our Ellis County webpage. This is information that anybody can access. New cases today, actually new cases of the last 2 days, we report every Monday, Wednesday, Friday in coordination with the KDHE. New cases as of today, which includes Saturday and Sunday, are 8 total cases. That brings us to an active COVID-19 case count of 13. Active means people that we're still have in isolation, we're still following up with daily, and they are still believed to be in that period of contagion. Active hospitalizations for Ellis County residents still stands at 1. Recovered cases brings us to 147. Positive tests, 158. We'll talk about that in a second. And then total tests are 3102. So that means total tests that have taken place, not total tests in Ellis County, but total tests of Ellis County residents. So There are very few minor tests that come from outside of Ellis County, and we do a lot of testing in Ellis County of outside of Ellis County residents with Hayes Med Center. Percent of positive, that's a total percent of positive. Since the onset of reporting, that's 5%. 7-day average percent of positive, which before we've talked about is one of our important metrics, is 3.5%. Total death still stands at 1. We do have 4 probable cases. We've talked in the past, but probable cases are those cases that were symptomatic, had contact, and met the KDHE requirements for person under investigation, but were never tested. So usually those are data mine cases where the KDHE goes back through, looks and sees spouse of someone maybe went in and had symptoms, but it was considerably outside of the window, maybe 2 months, 3 months ago, and they're credited towards probable cases. And that brings us to a total count of 161 total cases since the onset of COVID-19 in Ellis County. Now, as we look on these graphs, I should have made them smaller. 7-day average case growth. So the reason why I look at 7-day averages is because single data points can be skewed by either a large amount of tests that were maybe held up for a few days, or if we have no testing one day because those tests are held up, then that skews those individual data points. So we look at 7-day average case growth. As you can see, the peak is right around here, around the 22nd. We have had a precipitous decline, but as you can see, we are back on the climb with 7-day averages. Again, we go down here, we look at the 7-day average percent of positive. We see a very similar trend. 22nd, 23rd is our peak, down to about here, and we're starting to see that increase. Now, both those numbers are concerning in that we do see an increase. We never want to see increases. We want to see continued decline. However, what those numbers indicate is a lot of things. It indicates people taking their last summer vacation. It indicates weddings. It indicates funerals. It indicates people moving more. It indicates people gathering in groups. It indicates people becoming less accepting of these draconian measures. It means people are not adhering to the strict public health principles. And it also shows that we might have imported cases into the community. We have people that travel, go and get it, bring it back. When you have vectors, when you have people that are positive, they will likely infect at least one other. We've talked about R naught in the past. R naught of this is still greater than 1, which is why we see cases still continue. We will see that. Now, as we scroll down a little further, we look at the 2-week percent of positive case rate. So the reason why we started looking at this is because KDHE came out with new guidance for schools, basically, for keeping school buildings open, their gating criteria. So their gating criteria looks at it as 2-week chunks, 14-day chunks, basically. So as we look at that, our 2-week percent of positive case rate, again, peaks right around here, which is the 22nd, I believe, 23rd. We look at the 23rd, actually July 14th, sorry. The 2-week percent of positive case rates is July 14th. We see it start to fall. Again, you're going to see a slower trend increase with the 14-day positive because we still have 13 days of other data that were on the decline. We do see it start to go back up. Go down here, 2-week cumulative county index rate. So what this is basically we take, since we don't have 100,000 people in this county, right? We have 28,500. You take your numbers and you basically compare them to what is the case rate per 100,000. That way we can compare across the state. Small counties, large counties, everything gets compared to that rate per 100,000. As you see this, we saw our peak back here, which was the 23rd of July. We continue to fall down to a trough here, and we see it start climbing. Now, yes, it is concerning that we're climbing. However, if you look at this data specifically, cases per 100,000, how we compare across the state is we're still at a low number comparatively. We actually, if you look at CDC data has us ranked 42nd in cases per 100,000. Out of 105 counties, we're 42nd. We are the 20th largest county by population. So we are doing better per capita. But with inclines happening, with 4-day state coming back to town, with schools going back in session, inclines are concerning because they impact the state's metrics and gating criteria for schools. I have an 8, a 6, and a 3-year-old. I want my kids to go to school. I ask, I understand. I understand that the county is tired. I understand that the citizens are tired. I understand that we're all tired of COVID. But if we want kids back in the buildings, we want kids to get something from this year. We want kids to be educated and to do it in an environment that's safe for them. I need people to not be tired. I need them to be educated, and I need them to follow the basic principles of public health with mitigation measures. Wash your hands. Don't touch your eyes, nose, or mouth. Do not gather in groups. I don't know how many times I can stress that. We have cases again, 2 of our most recent cases, 2 out of the 8, are associated with weddings. Not weddings in our county, weddings in another county. It doesn't matter where the wedding is at. If someone has COVID at your gathering, you have increased your risk of contracting it. If no one shows up at the wedding with COVID, you're all fine. But if someone's there with it, you've increased your risk. Wear your masks when it's indicated, when it's appropriate. If you can't maintain social distancing, wear a mask. If you gather in groups, masks are not going to be what you need there. They help, but masks and social distancing go together. In conjunction, anyone without the other, you still have an increased risk. Don't gather in groups. If you can't maintain social distancing, wear your mask. Now, you guys have any questions specifically on the data?
I have a question about gating criteria. What exactly does that mean, and do you know what numbers the state is going to try to set for our county as far as percent of positive, things like that?
Sure. So the gating criteria, actually, we'll see if no. I was going to bring it up. So what the state came out with is actually a now this is guidance. This is not hard and fast. It's up to school boards. It's up to the schools to decide whether they want to enact these, whether they want to follow these. I'll keep track of the data to make sure that it's available for them. But this gating criteria is guidance from the state on what it looks like to go back to school. So as you can see, they have really pre-K through 12, pre-K 5, or 6 through 12. They have all the grades here. They have green, yellow, red levels, and they show what the school activities, what's allowed, what's not allowed. The gating criteria is here. So this gating criteria is exactly what we talked about. It's your 2-week cumulative county incidence rate. It's your trend in county incidence. Are you decreasing? Are you increasing? And then your hospital capacity that we've talked about before, and then your 2-week percent of positive for your county. So these are the metrics that the state has provided to schools. Now, like I said, every school in the state has their own reopening plan. They can choose to follow these. They can choose not to follow these. This is just guidance from the KDHE in conjunction with their school committee that they put together.
Okay, so I'm just trying to get through the graph here. So under 50 new cases per 100,000 people.
So that is
In a 2-week?
total cases over a 2-week period.
A 2-week time period, okay. And then we're in good shape. As long as we stay within that metric, they'll keep the school open.
Well, like I said, this is just guidance. Schools each can choose to implement. They can choose to have a different gating criteria. They can choose to do different. Like we've talked before, our county gating criteria for mitigation measures is different than this. It's similar. It follows a lot of the same metrics. We look at the same metrics, but how an individual school building, what it does with its population, is different than what we should do with the entire population. So that's all part of that. That goes into schools having an individualized plan that works for their individual building.
And that will be based on each public school board to make those gating criteria?
So it's going to be based on their plans. So their plans are put together
it's
based
a
off
plan there
best
to have.
available evidence. The school boards can approve the plans. It really is it's a group effort to try and come up with this kind of stuff. So this is specifically the gating criteria from the state, which is why we're tracking it as well, just so we have it available.
It seems like this would be an easy criteria for a county of our size to follow, but maybe a much more difficult in small counties with really low populations who might have no cases now and then get penalized because 2 people went out of county for a few days or something.
It's you know, with any of this stuff, it depends on how you look at the data. So it's the numbers are there. We'll provide the numbers to them. We'll provide them the best guidance. We'll obviously take the contact tracing, the contact investigation stuff. We'll work with them to see what the impact is. The facility, we've been meeting with them really since March on a weekly basis to make sure that we're helping them to get good information, and we want to bring kids back safely. I want my kids in schools. I want to provide a safe environment as best we can, and the schools, I will say, they truly have done everything they can to try and create safe environments within the schools. Now it's up to the public to create safe environments outside of the schools.
Yeah, I think it's extremely important just in terms of some of the data I've seen on child abuse. Lately, child abuse cases are way down, but it's not because childs aren't being abused. It's because they're not going to school and having somebody else find the abuse. So getting our kids back to school, I think, is important for parents. It's important for our economy, but we want them to be safe, and we want them to keep everybody else safe. As we all know, this is definitely hits an older population much harder when they contract COVID-19.
Sure, but we got to remember within school buildings, there's older population that's in there. There's teachers, there's custodial staff, there's administrative staff, there's volunteers.
Right.
My mother volunteers. It's she's in the at-risk population. It's we have those at-risk populations mixed with maybe a less risk population with the students. We all want to provide a safe environment. I understand there's tons of fear and angst, especially with schools. We've seen it nationwide. There's a resurgence of real fear in communities, in the nation. There's a resurgence of need for testing. There's a resurgence of this stuff, and it's based on the fear and the angst of returning to schools, returning to some of those activities that we view as risky. So having those kids in those large groups is gonna elevate some risk. We understand that. We will have positives in schools. We understand that. We're going to continue to have positives in our community. We understand that. How we as a community deal with that information, how we as a community work together to help us mitigate that risk is what determines how successful we are over the next year.
Jason, is there some promising data from other countries who have been in school? We run on this schedule that doesn't necessarily exist in the rest of the world about kids and how they spread COVID-19.
It's I will be honest, I don't want to get into a bunch of data from single point studies in other countries, right? Because it doesn't matter what you say, someone's going to construe it to their point of view. So we do have some of our own data right here in Ellis County. We have daycare centers that have been open throughout this. We thankfully have not seen massive spread come out of those. We have daycare centers that are open in the entire state and have been open throughout the entire pandemic. So we do have some of that stuff that we can look for. There is promise in that with the way that this virus impacts kids. But until we have the ability to look back at the data, until we have the ability to think about with a rational mind and without fear, it's hard to look at the data and say, yes, this is right, or no, that's not right. And we've polarized society. We've decided that 50% of the society thinks this is nothing, and 50% thinks this is the worst thing ever, and we've decided that there's going to be no middle. We're trying to play a zero-sum game, and we'll never win. So what we have to do is follow the evidence, create the safest space we can, try to create safe communities the best we can. People need to make good decisions. We need college kids not to party. Saw about 10,000 beer cans down around campus this weekend. I would assume that was not a social distancing party. I will say Fort Hays State has done a phenomenal job of trying to educate them. They provided testing to them. Fort Hays State has done their part. Now we need the kids to do their part. I think, is there more that we can do? Sure. But I think we've done our part to educate. Now we need people to accept it They need to be willing to follow those measures, and they need to use them to protect themselves and those around them.
Fort Hays State started up today, and I don't know if Jason knows, my wife is an instructor at Fort Hays State University, and right away this morning she goes, I got a couple emails. Apparently the county health department contacted a few of my students, and they will not be coming into class for 14 days. So I imagine you're seeing a lot of that in any of those cases. Then it's tough to do contact tracing in large parties where people wouldn't even know who each other are.
So I guess that's a decent segue into my next point if you guys don't have any more on the numbers. So contact tracing specifically with Fort Hays State, we have actually engaged with KDHE. KDHE will be taking on contact investigation and contact tracing for Fort Hays State specifically. So faculty, staff, students of Fort Hays State. The reason for that change is that, as we've talked before, we don't have a multi-jurisdictional view of communicable diseases in Ellis County. Cases are routed to the county of origin. We have a lot of kids that are from out of state, they're from out of county, they're from, out of the country. We have those students down here. We can't see that until it gets routed to the county of origin, or what if they put an address, if they put mom and dad's address. That's what we usually run into, is they put mom and dad's address down because that's their primary. They're living in the dorms. We've seen it all through the summer with other campus towns outside of Hays. We don't have a multi-jurisdictional view. We can't see all that. The state can. So we're routing our case investigation and case isolate or quarantine, case investigation, and what's the word I'm looking for here? Contact tracing. So case investigation is the initial contact to the positive. We walk through their steps. Contact tracing is the secondary process of that, where we notify the people who have been in contact that they're in quarantine. So we've routed that to the state. The state will take that on because they have a multi-jurisdictional view. They can see cases from every county in the state. They can see cases from outside the state. They know before we do if that kid is in our town. Now we're working with them, partnering with them, making sure that they get the information as quickly as possible and that they're following up. We've also worked with Fort Hays State to start looking at some plans of how we all work together, including the KDHE, to make sure that those kids get notified as quickly as possible and that we get them isolated and into quarantine as quickly as possible. That will not change how we do contact investigation or contact tracing for the rest of Ellis County. We will still be the primary because all of those people have primary residences in Ellis County. So as we work through this process, I will say with the public, I know there's already been some people, well, why didn't I get called? Well, the state's going to be a little bit slower, could be a little bit slower on that stuff. We do have a contact investigator assigned just to them. As we work through that, if the process isn't working, we will reevaluate it and we will fix it. But it's that's the process we're going through right now.
On a lighter note, the quarantine has become the new my dog ate my homework.
Sure.
Although on the first day of class, I don't think any of them had homework yet.
Any other questions specific to COVID?
No.
Okay.
We would expect, with Fort Hays doing testing now on students, with our school districts looking at testing students, faculty, athletes, we can expect numbers to just go up.
Absolutely.
And I guess one of the things that kind of bothers me about this whole situation, you get a positive test and they call it a case, even if it's not symptomatic. Historically, KDHE has not done that. If you had a positive test without symptoms, sometimes they'd label it a suspect case, usually had a little surveillance to do with it. But this is just a whole different thing. And I have a real hard time trying to separate cases from positive tests. I watch these drive-thrus on TV, and people driving through aren't sick people. They're well people. They're getting tested, they're getting positives, and everyone's panicking because we keep getting more cases when really all we're getting is positive tests. But we can expect positive tests to go up.
The worried will. Absolutely, we will. Mm-hmm. We will see cases go up as we test more. We'll see cases go up.
Sure.
That's why we focus on the percent of positives.
Mm-hmm.
If the percent of positive goes up, that means we have more spread inside the community. If the percent of positive stays low and we get more cases, it's a product of more testing. I will say, to your point specifically, we do track the ILI net numbers. So you know what that is, but The others might not. So influenza-like illness basically is reported to the state by a clinic here in town and then HaysMed ED. So that's reported to the state. We actually keep track of those ILI net numbers. And what that is people that come in that are sick. They're symptomatic. They don't feel well. They're credited as an ILI. They've now changed it to CLI, which is COVID-like illness, but same numbers. So as we track those numbers as well, we look at those. We have seen a steady decline in ILI net numbers really over the last month and a half. And the good thing about that is it speaks exactly to Commissioner's point, is that we are having more positives, but we don't have as many sick people. So we have positive test results, but people aren't as sick, which is great. It's, that's good for the community. We don't want sick people. We don't want people that have to seek out medical care. We don't want people that have to seek out hospitalizations, things like that. So as we see those numbers, we try to keep a swath over all the numbers, try to make sure that we're watching all of them to truly understand the impact or the disease burden of the virus.
Questions?
I have none. Did a great job.
Okay, the last thing I got for you guys, I actually applied for a grant through KDHE. It's staffing and infrastructure support grant specifically to COVID-19. We were approved for $69,546.26. I have not signed the statement yet. I wanted to run it by you guys and make sure that you guys are on, or that you're all on board with acceptance of that grant for.
Is there a time period to spend that money?
This one's actually 2022. And we can use it for general infrastructure support at the health department, so we can use it for overtime to pay for contact tracing. We can use it for really anything specific to COVID-related expenses. So stuff that was not budgeted for, but is specific to COVID, we can use it until 2022.
Okay, that sounds good to me.
That sounds good. Do you have a plan of what you think that money would be spent on?
Yeah, most of it's probably going to go to overtime.
Overtime hours,
for
okay.
Contact tracing and that kind of stuff. So I actually did apply for another grant that is specific to COVID testing. Hopefully, if that one comes through, I want to prioritize funds towards testing of the at-risk populations, specifically the communal living at-risk populations. So those populations of people that outside of long-term cares, because they're already doing a phenomenal job of testing, they have nurses, but it's the elderly communal living situations where they don't have access to nursing care. That's still an at-risk population, still has a higher incidence of spread. So prioritizing some testing towards that to make sure that we, if we do have something inside the walls, we can hopefully isolate and quarantine quickly.
Okay,
Very good.
sounds good. Thank you, Jason.
Thank you.
Okay, the next item is a CDBG CV grant. Lyle?
Good evening, Lyle Pantel, Assistant Director of Fire and Emergency Management. Our next step in our CDBG process, we've been approved for $132,000 to use towards economic development grants and micro grants. And the next step is to sign our contract for approval between Ellis County and the state of Kansas. We have until the 21st of this month to sign that contract, making it binding, in which case we could start moving forward in our process of making it public and accepting applications.
Who's going to be the administrator of that grant?
Between me and JD is
Okay.
going to help, to my knowledge, at this point.
Is it a complicated grant, or?
I don't think it's complicated. It's just work heavy. There's a lot of paperwork, a lot of tracking that goes into it.
Okay. Questions?
Lyle, who's eligible to write for this grant? I know that probably one of the biggest complaints I had about the other one was our inability to advertise it, that it was available. It was just such a tight time frame. Who's it eligible for, and what kind of time frame do they need to get these applications in?
So at this time, we don't have an application period.
Okay.
We're still rolling around ideas with that, but it's going to be open to for-profit businesses, basically 0 to 5 employees for our micro grants and 6 to 50 employees for our economic development grants.
Okay.
Lyle, I'll pass those out to everybody.
Okay.
Oh, perfect.
This is just a flyer that we've come up with, breaking down a little bit more what goes into the CDBG-CV grant, and that was put together for us by Melissa Dixon and Sarah Bloom. If you have any questions, the only change I've seen necessary for it so far has been the email address. We want to use a different email than the Ellis Cares one that we have on there, just to avoid confusion and make sure that we don't overflow that inbox, and that the questions get answered in an appropriate amount of time.
Lyle, quick question. I think there were quite a few counties that got this grant before us on a first round of funding. Have you seen how some of those counties have been able to distribute this grant funding?
I have not looked into it too far. I have noticed that they've created their own mechanism for deciding how much each applicant will get based on how much the county received. There was a maximum of $300,000 that the county could receive, and then depending on what size the business was, that determined how much they could get per employee and per business, a maximum for each business. And counties have kind of done their own task of whittling that down to what they deem appropriate based on how much they've got and what the request is from the community.
It appears this grant is, just from this flyer, is more towards economic development and for-profit businesses in terms of working capital and inventory, 60 days of inventory while their business wasn't allowed to be open, wages, payroll, rent, those type of things. It's not necessarily COVID specific in terms of mitigating the spread of COVID-19. It's more about the economic impact of these businesses.
That's correct.
Okay. Well, I will do my best to let the small business owners I know about it, and I imagine this money will be gone pretty quick. So
the state has also indicated with the CARES Round 2 that there will be funding available, and they've kind of highlighted 9 areas that they want to target, but small in a weird sense of the word, meaning businesses with 500 or fewer employees could apply for business grants as well for the same projects, wages, payroll, rent, utilities.
So similar deal where they're coming in more in an economic impact than a COVID-19 impact.
Should you take that route, they also have grants available for IT, PPE, procurement, and other things, and that's available online to read a little bit more about.
And I'll cover that in a little bit in my report too. There is a downside to this. It follows the normal CDBG guidelines. Unfortunately, it's not quick and rapid fire like COVID, our CARES funding was.
Yes, well, we need to pull back the reins, and our thought was that we let the Ellis Cares play out, see who gets approved for funding, and if there are some who fall through the cracks, make sure that they don't miss out on this as well, because there's definitely that possibility. So we'll kind of tiptoe forward at this point, but we just need to have the contract signed, making sure that we accept what the state has given us.
Sure. Well, I would say the biggest complaint that I have had and come through my email is equitable spending of that, which we knew we were going to get. I mean, sometimes you just wonder why people don't understand the situation, even though you talk about it every single time somebody comes up to the stand about how hard it was to be equitable. But also, the time frame was just so tight on that one that we kind of had to go with what we could on it.
With this, we have until July 31st of next year to have all the money spent. 50% needs to be spent in 6 months, and then all of it in a year's time. So
it's just a tougher application process, JD, because of the CDBG aspect of it. Yeah,
that's right. Okay. Low to moderate income, we have to interview have to have them fill out an interview form for their employees. So they have to jump through hoops on this one.
Okay. Is there any, so low to moderate income, I think, is always a CDBG type of setup, but does that mean it requires a tax return? Those are other issues I had from other small business owners was, did you guys get a look at any financial information? Answer, no. We did not get to look at any financial information, not even whether or not they took advantage of PPP loans or anything like that, so.
So two things on that. I did meet with the auditor today. It's actually even questionable if we want to get into tax returns versus just financials. Prepared financial statements might be a better way to go. And then the PPP, that was looked at by the group. They got the listing of those that I believe received over 50,000.
Okay,
So,
yeah.
but the ones that are under 50, those weren't made available.
Which I would think would be the majority of
I would
them,
too.
but yes, I got to see that list too, because I think that we wanted to see who was coming back for more, essentially, so, okay.
Okay, do I hear a motion?
I make a motion to approve the commission chair to sign the CDBG-CV and have emergency management submit it to the state.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Thank you, Lyle.
Thank you.
Okay, next is the K-Works Delegate and Annual Meeting. JD.
Yes, thank you, sir. We actually have a few things for you on this one particular item. The first is for Ellis County to select and nominate one person to serve as our voting delegate, and then a second to be as the alternate. That's item one. And then item number two is to vote for folks to represent the whole state on the board. There are three positions that are up for consideration. There's an at-large position that came available because the person that did have the position lost an election, so they're not available anymore. So the at-large position is available, and then the Northeast District, which is Brown, Donovan, Jackson, Jefferson, Lyon, Marshall, Osage, Pottawatomie, and Wabunsee counties. And then the Southwest District, which is Clark, Ford, Grant, Gray, Hamilton, Haskell, Hodgman, Kearney, Lane, Meade, Morton, Ness, Scott, Stanton, and Stevens counties. And so they're asking for your approval of whomever you would like to nominate for each of those three seats.
Okay. Gentlemen.
Well, in past, usually the chair is the delegate and the vice chair is the alternate, so I'd say we continue that.
That's a good tradition to continue, I think.
I'm fine with that.
Yeah, okay.
And then, again, the at-large is, to my knowledge, there are no candidates that have come our way. Has there been anyone brought to you? Mm-hmm. So that's completely vacant. Northeast County does have a current incumbent, and that's Linda Buttrin from Jefferson County. And the Southwest District has an incumbent, Sandy Barton, who is the Stanton County Clerk. I've heard no other candidates.
Haven't either.
Nobody usually wants these jobs, do they?
So we need to approve these people or not
You
approve
can
them? Or?
approve the two incumbents if you would like, and then if you would like to nominate someone for the at-large, or I suppose you could just skip that if you chose not to.
Skip all the above. I don't know any of them.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, are they?
Linda and Sandy.
Okay.
I don't know them. Do we want to go ahead and nominate them or just let them alone?
I don't like putting my name on stuff when I don't know people, because I feel like I'd find out later I probably shouldn't have voted for them. But, I have no problem. I think if they're willing to do the job, I'd be okay with whatever you guys think.
What do you think, Dean?
In the past, I think we just let it float, but So obviously our clerk knows them, but still, I don't.
I'm kind of siding with Dean. Just
Yeah, let's let it float.
by.
Okay.
Yeah. Somebody else will nominate him, I know.
Somebody will know them. They'll be closer to them.
That's right.
Very good. We will pass it along.
Okay. Our next item is the tax foreclosure sale. Bill?
Bill Jeter, County Councilor. It's that time of year, we're just not quite finished with last year's tax sale, and I've kind of figured out it probably takes about 13 or 14 months to go through one, so we're going to have a little bit of overlap. But Treasurer's Office provided me a spreadsheet last week. We've got 17 properties that would be eligible for a tax sale, total amount of over $57,000. It's our recommendation that we go ahead and institute a tax foreclosure on those properties and continue to do this annually. It certainly helps us and the Treasurer's Office if we have less numbers we're dealing with every year instead of holding off for 3 or 4 years and then be dealing with 40 or 50 properties. So that would be our recommendation. The financial impact, there'd be some cost for preparation of certificates of title and additional publication and process service fees. All of those will be redeemed at some point in the future. I have a resolution form, and I'm not sure of a number, Donna.
It'll be 14, I believe.
14, okay. That if you're so inclined, would ask that you approve that resolution, which is required by law in order to authorize me to go ahead and institute a tax foreclosure on your behalf. And the first step is to get this spreadsheet to the 2 abstracting companies, and they'll divide them up, and then they'll prepare certificates of title. And it's from those titles that I know who to sue, and then we'll start that process. So,
Okay.
any questions?
Questions, Dean?
None for me.
No, it says you need a motion. Do we have motion language to it?
There would be just a motion to approve resolution number 14 to authorize the county councilor to initiate a tax foreclosure proceeding.
Do we hear a motion?
I move we approve Resolution 14 and authorize the county councilor to institute an action in the District Court of Ellis County, Kansas regarding delinquent real estate taxes.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Motion passes 3-0.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have the solid waste tire disposal event. Bill, or Vern, excuse me.
Me. Vern Reuter, landfill foreman. Just come before you to update you on our half-price tire disposal event. You guys approved last year for the foreman to do this annually, and we do this for a 2-week period. Last year it was very successful with hauling in more than 10 times the amount of tires that we normally haul in. This is just to help reduce, fire hazards, mosquitoes and stuff. And this year we're looking at doing it September 21st through October 3rd. And we're going to put a public service announcement out this week, and it's going to be on the Ellis County website and social medias. So, you have any questions on it? Or?
So what will the price, like bringing car tires out, whatever, truck
It'll be
tires?
5 cents a pound is the
5 cents a
discounted rate.
pound. Okay.
Last year, our revenue for tires last year was about $8,500, and after paying for disposal was about $4,000 net, and it cost us about $500 last year to do this for 2 weeks. So it didn't cost a whole lot to get rid of all 30 tons of tires,
So 5 cents per pound, no matter what size they are.
no matter what size. Yep.
Okay.
Vern, how do we get rid of them out there? Do we have a company that comes and hauls them off?
Double D mat shop out of Park City comes and they pick them up.
I'm sure you price quote that all the time to try and make sure you get.
Yes.
You're the type of guy who does that. so.
We used to deal with resource management, and we got a lot better deals through Double D.
Very good, very good. Yeah, I'm fine with this.
Sounds like a good program.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks, Vern.
County Administrator report, JD.
Well, thank you all. At the very beginning, Donna, did you have any election follow-up that you wish to do, or you covered all?
Right, I appreciate the Board of Canvassers, approving and going forward with the approval of the 2020 primary election.
Thank you. I wanted to, first, I have about 3 things to share with you this evening, maybe 4. The first is I wanted to let you know that we did get the CARES program filed with the state. Did that on Friday, and we've already received confirmation back on both the reimbursement side as well as our direct aid side. So that is off and going. I did learn on Friday some additional information that the state is apparently doing what you might call sweeps at these applications. So they'll take one sweep through and go ahead and approve right away the things that they think are kind of the no-brainers, to paraphrase a little bit. And then they'll come back through on the more difficult questions and cull through those. So we may hear some of it sooner rather than later. So I'll keep you posted on that. I have a number of next steps to do at this point. I met today with our auditor, although she can't advise me because she's probably going to be doing the single audit that we'll have to do at the end of the program. She was able to give me some general guidelines. I talked through it with her, the process that we would go through. Tomorrow, Bill and I are meeting, and then tomorrow also we're having a staff meeting. Donna and a couple of folks from her office and Sharon, and we're going to walk through the way this will work as far as the staffing is concerned, and because we're going to have a lot of interaction with folks that are recipients of the funding. We need to make sure we have everything lined up and ready for that, and communications ready. We have to develop a memorandum of understanding yet, and I'll bring that to you because there'll probably be some provisions for you all to take up on that. We'll probably do some sort of letter to them, letting them know the process, to give them a heads up so that they can begin getting paperwork in order in the event that they are approved by the state, and we can go ahead and release payments. So kind of keeping the ball rolling since our time is so tight on that. And then I was glad Lyle mentioned to you that not only the CV program, the Community Development Block Grant CV program, but also kind of gave a nice segue into, I was going to share with you too, that the Governor Kelly announced this week that on August 19th, which is Wednesday at noon, the portal will open up for the what we're calling round 2. There's a name for it. It's called Back to Business, which is right down the alley of what you were talking about a moment ago, that it is very much for business assistance. And I'm just going to read through the categories. I won't go into great detail. But there is a website set up, and there will be a portal open on Wednesday at noon. It's at kansascommerce.gov/COVID relief. So it's pretty easy to get to. Doug Williams at Groves Hayes has offered to help people if they would like to have assistance with their applications or applying online, and he wanted me to pass that along, which I thought was very nice of them to do. They don't really play a role, Groves Hayes won't, because it will be directly between the business and the state. And it's a first come, first served. So I just encourage everyone to get ready when the portal opens at noon on Wednesday. Be ready to hit send or go in. And in the meantime, they can go in online and they can read about what I'm going to share just now. So the following categories of grants will be available. Small business working capital grants. These are for businesses with 500 or fewer employees, which is almost everybody here, I believe. Also securing local food systems grants, so grocers and food banks and those types of folks will be available for that. Our PPE procurement grants and manufacturing grants, so folks that either need to get more PPE items could qualify that way, and then if they have an interest in producing any of the PPE types of things, that also could be an option for them if they're looking for optional business opportunities. There's also a COVID-19 bioscience product development acceleration grant. So these are for therapeutic type of things. I'm not sure if it really applies to a lot here. But connectivity emergency response grants. So these are to increase the need of connectivity. We're hearing quite a bit about that these days. Broadband partnership adoption grants are another category people could apply for getting some type of connectivity for their business. and then more IT and cyber security type of things for the larger businesses that might be applicable. And then finally, a Kansas Tech College Advanced Manufacturing Grant. So those that, let's see, these are individuals affected by COVID-19 to meet economic sector needs in high demand, high wage occupations. So a lot of opportunities out there, and as I think the key here, once again, is timing, and it's a first come, first serve. So encourage everyone that you know to apply as soon as possible. So, and then one other off of that topic, I was just going to share with you in staffing, we did have a resignation in Mike's area in IT, and so we're going ahead moving forward with recruiting for the open position that came about as a result of that. And that's the end of report.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Commissioner, you have a report.
I would just like to thank Mike Leiker for filling in for me at the Board of Canvassers. Mike, thank you very much for filling in and doing my job. That's all.
Commissioner Roth.
Just a couple things. I will echo that. We had a couple of mics up here, and it probably made it confusing for you a little bit, Butch, when you had to say the word Mike. But Mike Morley, thank you for setting in for me on that canvassing. Mike is one of the smartest, swiftest, best-spoken guys that I've ever met, so he's a big upgrade up here when I'm not around. So. The next thing, last week I spent a large portion of the week planning Leadership Kansas Northwest, which will be a mix between Hayes and it'll be Garden City this year. They've kind of made, we usually have our own, and we actually will have both cities represented this time. And so spent a lot of my week doing that. We started the fundraising process to try to show these 27 individuals the best of what Northwest Kansas has to offer, and what the town of Hayes does, as well as all of the industry around here, farming, oil, our robust colleges and secondary education, as well as healthcare. Which seem to be staples of our county. So I'm excited to be a part of that. I will be speaking to the group about downtown Hayes and the development that we've had and successes we've had over there. Also would like to ask you guys if you can come when they're coming into town on that Friday. I will send you a message just to greet them when they show up for the session, just so I think the more elected officials that they get to see, the more they feel like we're happy they're coming out to take a look. So if time helps, same with you, JD. I'd love to have you there just to welcome them. They'll start out at brief space, and I'll let you guys know when that is exactly. The last thing from me is I've received a few complaints and scrutiny of the individuals that helped us with the CARES Act, the groups that we've put together. It really has hit me hard in terms of that kind of scrutiny from people who took time out of their busy schedules to do what they hoped would be best for Ellis County. Any of that scrutiny is not hitting well with me. It's not going to help you in any process down the road with me. I am the type of individual that likes to be thankful for the work that people do. Whether I agree or not, I think they knew that they were going to have scrutiny with the process. But, you know, if you don't receive an email back from me because you're scrutinizing the group of people that went to bat to help us do this CARES Act in the best way that we could, it's just because I don't care about your opinion on that. I am happy to see the scrutiny, but any attack of any of the individuals that helped with for-profit, nonprofit, government, any of that, the scrutiny is fine, the questioning is fine. The personal attacks on their character because of those decisions, you just won't get anything back from me, and I will change my opinion of you immediately if I ever had a good opinion of you. So that's it from me. Thank you.
Okay, and I have no report. The Board of Meeting will adjourn at 6:22.
Thank you, Butch.